DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. It's a new day in New York City.
And especially a new day in Harlem, baby. Harlem
Yeah,
has
absolutely.
new leadership
They
happening.
made it through the ranked choice voting process. It was a little,
Yes.
little racket, little, little
Uh,
shaky there, but
I mean, for a second there, okay, so with Eric Adams, and then suddenly Catherine Garcia really gaining momentum, and then also Maya Wiley not yet dead. It was like very interesting watch there, man.
yeah. So I hope we learn some things through it. I hope next time we can get through it a little bit more smoother. And people are learning. So I mean, for first time out, no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. So
We'll probably also have to have a follow up to our previous one with Professor Wallace Ford to talk
yeah,
about ranked choice, as well as also Vince Thomas,
right.
and kind of really get their take on things. But
So
you know what?
congratulations are all obviously due to all the people who made it through the process, and in particular our two guests today who are going to be ostensibly representing Harlem in the city council. We don't want to ignore the fact that there is a November election, and we want people to be out there and support for that as well. But let's introduce our guests.
Why don't you bring them out? Because you know what, this one you were really hyped for. Let's see what you do there, Night
Well, okay,
Watchman.
so without further ado, we've got Kristin for Harlem, Kristin Richardson Jordan, who
Yes.
won in the ninth district,
Uh-huh.
and we have Shaun Abreu, who I don't remember the number of the district, but I
It's
know where it
seven,
is.
seven. See, you used to be
Seven.
a West Harlemite, for God's sake. Come on,
I'm not there. I haven't been in West Harlem for a while,
DJ
but
uh,
LeRoy is my
I
constituent.
did used
that's
to
right.
be over there. So
That's
uh,
right. That's why he's near and dear to me because I'm one of his constituents. Okay, so just so
right,
you
right.
know.
Well, I'm
So,
one of Kristen's, so we
uh,
balance this thing
Hey,
out very, very well. So
such
first of all,
excellent,
congratulations.
excellent to both of you for sure. So you know what? Let's get this popping.
Mhm.
So Kristen, now you're a fourth generation Harlemite, right?
I am not. I wish. I am third generation.
Oh, three.
Three,
Okay,
just three generations. My kids will be the fourth.
got beautiful. So please tell us the journey. What made you decide to take on an incumbent there? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, Night Watchman. Let me see if I can get rid of that. But anyway, Kristen, go ahead.
So a couple things. So the first piece is political inspiration. I was really inspired by the elections of the squad to the new Congress. So AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, Ayanna Presley. Just seeing these powerful women of color with very progressive, even radical views running for office and winning. That was a big piece of my inspiration in that it just opened up my political imagination to the possibility of that type of person in office. Before that, I pretty much wrote off politicians as people who were sellouts and not actually for the community. And so, therefore, I was just going to keep doing my thing as a general organizer and activist and teacher and poet. Um, the other thing that factored into it was my personal journey. I'm a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. And for me, part of my healing journey was to actually find my self-esteem, my self-confidence, figure out my gifts, figure out my mission and what I could bring to the world. And I really felt called to this race. I know people have different beliefs about that, and that's totally fine. But I identify as Christian and Buddhist. I practice both faiths, and I really did feel called to serve in this way. Um, and then, we're just going to throw in just a little bit of anger because our current city councilman or the previous incumbent voted for the de Blasio new jails plan. And I was a big advocate to close Rikers without building these new jails. And then subsequent to that, he voted for a city council budget that did not defund NYPD, but just shuffled money over to really, increase the presence of cops in schools. So that also angered me and running in and for Central Harlem in my community, we're one of the most policed, over-policed, have some of the highest incarceration rates in the city. So, in my mind, I didn't care where the pressure may have come from or what else was going on. The impact on our community is just tremendous. So I really wanted to stand up against that and advocate for all the things that were part of my campaign, putting the money back into the community, fighting environmental racism, putting money into the schools, into after school programs, into violence intervention, and that all of that motivated me too. So it's been a really interesting journey. Definitely blessed. There were a lot of pitfalls and roadblocks. I'm a non-traditional politician. I'm very much a newcomer to electoral politics. Definitely know a lot about politics. Definitely not a newcomer to activism and organizing and community work. Absolutely not a newcomer to Harlem, but definitely a newcomer to this world of electoral politics, and that made the journey interesting as well. But I think I represent a new wave that the community is ready for and clearly voted for.
Beautiful, beautiful. And also riding that new wave, my council member, Shaun Abreu. Shaun, take it away. Tell us your journey, also being the first one in the family to be a college graduate and an immigrant from Dominican Republic. Do tell, my brother.
I sure will. Well, first off, I'd like to congratulate Kristin on her historic win. I'm from District 7. District 7 is my home. I was born and raised in Washington Heights. I'm a proud son of immigrants from the Dominican Republic. I went from being evicted as a child to becoming a tenant lawyer, keeping families in their homes. I went from being held back in the 4th grade to graduating from Columbia University because of investments in after-school programs for our kids and for our families. I know what's possible when government makes the right investments, and that's what inspired me to run. If my mom had free legal services in the 1990s, perhaps I'll be staying in my parents will still be in their rent-stabilized apartments, but we had to give that away. If it weren't for after-school programs at Columbia, which made a difference for me and allowed me to get into college, I don't know where I would be today. And so it is these programs that I am committed to investing in. And government plays a very big role in that, especially the city council. So for me, it is an honor to represent the place I've known my entire life. My mom works at Zabar's in the Upper West Side, so Zabar's is our home. My father is a proud janitor at the Port Authority, where he is a proud 32BJ member. And I'm fighting for working class families. In this race, I was, I believe, the labor candidate. I was the candidate for working class families. I was the candidate for tenants, and the candidate for all, the candidate that had the broadest appeal, that delivered the message that was most inclusive to everyone in this district. And I think that was observed with the results on election night.
Excellent, excellent. Now, even though both districts are side by side, we have Central Harlem, West Harlem right there, right? They definitely have sometimes different priorities. So, Kristin, what would you say are some of the major priorities of your district?
Well, when the people themselves were polled on this issue, the number one issue was housing. So I am gonna. I mean that may not be so different from District 7, but the impacts of gentrification on Central Harlem and the lack of housing, actually affordable housing for our constituents in District 9, is a huge issue, and it's one of the things that I ran on. My platform spelled out Harlem, and each letter stood for a different policy point. And then I had steps within those policy points on how we get there. So the A in my Harlem platform was actually affordable housing. And I have an 11-step plan on how we get to actually affordable housing in Harlem. And part of what I was advocating for is that we redo the metrics completely. So that's one of the things that's front and center for me. Right now, we get lumped in with Midtown, Downtown, and even Westchester when they take average incomes to then figure out what is, quote unquote, an affordable housing apartment. So doing that, doing complete renovations to the ULERP process, and stopping the tide of gentrification and displacement As I have said publicly, I'll keep saying it's not that new people can't move in, and it's not that even new white people can't move in. It is simply that it is unacceptable to displace those of us who have been here for generations. It's the displacement is inhumane and unacceptable. So having a racial impact study, looking at how we redo the process and how we keep people in their homes is top of my list.
Excellent, excellent.
And
Shaun.
to that, if I may add, I think one
Mhm.
of the things that, while Kristin and I may be a little somewhat different, ideologically or politically, one thing that we did both very well, I think, was that we did not discard one group or demographic in our district. We engaged literally everybody. And with ranked choice voting, you gotta speak to everyone and meet people where they're at. And I think what Kristin did very well was she was a bridge, and I think in my district as well, we were the bridge between the old guard and the new guard, right? We can communicate to folks who've been here their whole lives because we're from this neighborhood. We're also, fairly young, so we can speak to the newcomers that are coming into this district. So home is for the newcomers, but folks who've been here their whole lives. But for the folks that are coming in here for the first time, it's important that they also honor our neighborhood's history. And I think that's what our campaign did very well.
Okay, I'm something certainly we know on the national stage. When they hear the whole thing, and I heard you're inspired of folk, Kristin, in terms of Ilhan and AOC and so forth. So when you hear the word, let's say, progressive on the local stage, how would you classify yourself? Are you a progressive candidate?
Is a question for Kristin?
Yeah.
Either one. Both of y'all take that. Go ahead.
I would classify myself as a progressive candidate. Yes, I would. I do think that I am more radical. And if I could choose my own language, I would choose radical first. But that's not as an attempt to alienate people. Ella Baker said radical means we get at the root of things, right? So that simply means a look at the structure of white supremacy, the structure of capitalism, the structure of patriarchy, all these things that are systemically structured, and how do we get at the root and turn it over? But I know that word can scare people. It was right. The mission of my campaign was to disrupt the district with radical love. Now, for some people, having the love there softened it enough to really get the message. For others, it was a little bit more of a journey to say, what I mean by radical is this turning over of the root causes, is this look at redoing things and disrupting the status quo. But am I a progressive? Absolutely. I would definitely call that progressive.
Okay. Shaun, how about you?
Yeah, 100% consider myself a progressive. Focus on the problem and working from the problem backwards, figure out what the solution is. That's usually my approach to issues. But yeah, I'm very much a progressive, and the labor candidate. I'm the candidate for working families. So I think that's the definition of progressive.
Shaun, what was the moment for you when you decided you wanted to throw your hat in the ring, so to speak?
I would say the moment, it would be sometime after law school, right? Forget which month exactly, but I've always saw the law as a means to an end. I am a practicing lawyer. I always think about what is the outcome we want to see change? How do we effectuate that outcome? And how does the law allow you to get there, right? So it was really rooted. The baseline reason is that I know this is my home, and I can connect on a personal level with the experiences of working class families, right? So many families in our district were facing housing insecurity, right? And evicted, right? And how they were able to bounce back, or struggling academically and how they were able to bounce back. That was that baseline connection that really, really made me think, you know what, I should be running. But then after the pandemic hit, that's when things really got, when things that were pre-existing were only put really at the forefront for a lot of folks finally. and the inequities that existed were put in the spotlight. And it was in those moments that, our leadership was tried, and we had to get creative. How do we respond to this crisis? And so it was sometime after law school, but really everything really came full circle when the pandemic hit.
Well, one of the things I definitely have to ask is that with a crowded field, both of you guys, what was your experience in terms of ranked choice voting? You're a big fan of it. It was something that, hey, we just have to accept. Do tell.
Well, I'm a big fan. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know to what extent people have gotten a chance to look at results, but on election night itself, we were behind by about 294 votes.
Mm.
So we were thousands of votes ahead of the next closest competitor, but we were 294 votes behind the incumbent in this race. And it was because of ranked choice voting that we got that tip over the top. We actually picked up another, I think, just shy of 600 votes due to ranked choice voting. So the impact of that in this race was huge. I think, in a crowded field, ranked choice voting allows us to continue having conversations. I don't want to speak for Shaun, so I don't know if he.
I'll go into a little bit, Kristin.
But I think it allows, we could talk to voters, and then if they do have a favorite candidate, we can keep talking and it doesn't end the conversation. And that's the part I really liked about ranked choice voting. And there's been a lot of speculating about, does it help progressives? Does it help more moderates? Who does ranked choice voting help? And my theory is it helps the person with the biggest ground game who's talking to the most people. And in that way, it's actually supporting the grassroots candidate. And I'm an advocate for it.
Yeah, I agree with Kristin as well there. I'm a huge advocate for ranked choice voting, and it does favor the candidate who has the broadest coalition and the candidate who can reach most people. I'll say it again, folks didn't know this. I had at least 100 building captains throughout my district. These are folks that would get petitions for me, right, on their own. These are folks who would canvass their own buildings for me on their own. And so this is how we were able to win every assembly district in Council District 7. On election night, we were at 27%. Runner-up was at 11%. After RCV came in, we were at 63%. Runner-up was at 37%, right? And this was despite the fact that, there was a coalition that was formed against me in my district. But even then, folks within the coalition, that's where I got most of my votes, which is to say that with ranked choice voting, you can't tell people how to vote. You can't be paternal. This is the vote that the voters make, and we can't interfere with that decision-making process, right? From one of my main opponents, I got 1,085 votes. From another person, I got 798. From another person, I got over 700. So just keeping voters honest and letting them know where you stand, despite people forming coalitions against you. Voters know. People went to the poll sites on election day. I already got my list. Like, what are you giving me, right? And by the time that coalition was formed against me, I had already identified over 7,500 voters that were voting for me. So it's coalitions. I think voters don't really receive very well because they don't like to be told what to do, and voters, especially high-informed voters, do not like to be told what to do. But just staying on message is what ranked choice voting taught me. Don't cave to the distractions and stay on message. Focus on what your campaign is about and your identity of your campaign, and figure out ways to lift up working families. And I think that's what really drove it home for us.
I think there's another benefit from ranked choice voting is that it forces voters to be more engaged in the process. If you wanted to vote this year, you just, it wasn't just like throwing darts at the dartboard. You actually had to look at the candidates and maybe go and read their bios or watch their videos to really find out if you align with them. And then, of course, all of us got hit with like 2 tons of mail. So I don't know if you guys were so heavy on the mail. Now, Kristin, let me ask you this question, because Number one, you obviously ran a sterling campaign, especially for a newcomer. You were very early on with your street game. I saw posters for you up way before everybody else was putting things in. So tell me just
Yeah.
about your process at the beginning, because it seems like you planned your campaign pretty well and you shepherded your resources, which I don't know what they were, but I feel like you used them pretty adroitly.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we ran a grassroots campaign. I'm an organizer, so my background is in mobilizing people to go march
Mhm.
or to do a food giveaway or to do a clothing drive. So, like the mutual aid and wellness was a lot of work that I was involved in pre-pandemic. We amped it up because of the pandemic, but I had always been an organizer in community doing that type of work. And then the organizing for a protest, right? What do? You leaflet everybody, you put posters up around the neighborhood, you call and text people, you try to get others to come and march with you, right? I know people don't really make connections between protests and running for office, but like that was really the model. A lot of that is the model that we used, an organizer model. And we did start early because I predicted, and it turns out I was correct, that it would come down to whoever could beat Perkins, because there is an incumbent in the seat with excellent name recognition who has been in local office for over 20 years. And at the end of the day, it's going to be less about like the scattered field, even though it was a large field and it's 14 people. It's going to be more about who can have a presence and connect with more enough people to overcome this, seemingly insurmountable amount of name recognition. So we did start early, and I know that's unusual as well. But like I said, I felt called, and I knew what it was I was going to do. So it's like, let's start now, like spread the word now, and there are folks who did think it was pretty wild because they said, oh, people won't remember you 2 years later, but people did remember me 2 years later. I was out on election day in front of a poll site, and I ran into someone who was like, you know what, you came and you spoke at my community center, the senior center, 2 years ago, before they were shut down, pre-pandemic. And I remember your speech, and I remember how passionate you were about Harlem and making some changes and really working for the community. And I have you, and I'm ready to vote. And then she pulled out a flyer, which was one of our old flyers from the very beginning. We didn't even have real printing. We didn't have cardstock. It was literally off your home printer type of flyer. And she pulled that out of her pocket and she kept it for a year and a half,
Wow.
and
Nice.
had come to vote. So I think the impact of starting early and having a strong message and having passion, and being grassroots, really made a difference. It was a lot of people. I mean, we had building captains as well, and we had block captains, and it was a lot of people just organizing and doing visibility and doing outreach, and it was very different from a traditional campaign, because a lot of times when people run for office, they're already well connected, right? So they already have, okay, well, so and so is going to endorse me, so and so is going to support me. And so you get the support that person has, and that's typically how a machine works, right? There's all those well connected influences already happening. But what we did, since we didn't have that, was just good old grassroots organizing, neighbor to neighbor. We had just thousands and thousands of conversations.
Beautiful.
Now,
And Sean,
tell us
what
the acronym, the Harlem acronym for
Huh?
your campaign. What does it all stand for?
Oh, it's so the H is holding police accountable and abolition. A is actually affordable housing. R for redistributing wealth and resources to those most in need. L is living longer. It's a care package for Harlem seniors. Also some violence intervention and general health. E is education for all and environmental justice. And then M was meaningful change. So it was all in a Harlem acronym.
Harlem. All right. Nice.
You got her message down.
I do. You know, I'm a teacher and a poet, right? That's why. So we like a good acronym. Both teachers and poets like a good acronym. So that's what. That's
That was a very impressive one.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
while Shaun, while certainly you didn't have the challenge of beating an incumbent, you did in terms of West Harlem have the challenge of, let's say, we'll say the 900-pound behemoth, which is Columbia University. You have, of course, let's say the other things in terms of public housing from Grant to also Manhattanville. Do tell, what were some of the challenges that you overcame in order to actually be here right now?
Well, you know, before I went to law school, I've had a lot of relationships, right? This is home. And so getting back, you know, there were already folks in the race who were, you know, determined by many outsiders to be the winner. And so I come in and, you know, folks are just unhappy. But it's also like recultivating a lot of relationships. So, you know, the biggest challenge was, you know, meeting folks again and making sure we were up to speed on what we need to do 2 years out, right? Like Kristin said, you got to start early. And so we started early. You know, the politics block by block is different. The needs are different. And being able to speak to different neighborhoods in ways that resonate with them was also a challenge. Raising money, I've always thought that I would do well, but it was never became a reality until you actually have to get it done and start making phone calls, right? Making phone calls to folks from college, making phone calls to folks in the neighborhood. We raised $50,000 within the first 6 months. You know, we knew we had to come in and make a statement. And so that was an uphill battle. But look, I also enjoyed a lot of support, right? I enjoy the support of Councilmember Levine and Congressman Espaillat. I've worked on their campaigns in 2012 and 2014. But, you know, how do you, but I think what really, really made the big difference for us was doing the building by building organizing. I ran Mark's campaign in 2013. So I got an understanding of how to run campaigns and how to win campaigns. But I think that my organizing experience really made the biggest difference. We organized building by building, Dear Neighbor letters throughout the entirety of the district. My mom was also played a very important role. My mom's text messages and emails played a very big role in having my family on the street with me, being credible messengers. This is my son. This is my son. I know him better. Know him best than anyone else. That really drove
the secret sauce right there. It was mom.
My mom was she's always the secret sauce.
Exactly. So you notice I mentioned public housing. Let's say, Kristin, what was the relationship with NYCHA? You visited a number of the developments in terms of getting out your message. Do tell.
Yeah, well, first I want to say I definitely agree about Mama's secret sauce. Our largest fundraiser was my mother's fundraiser, and it was mainly just her saying, you know, everyone needs to give to my daughter's campaign.
Nice.
But in terms of NYCHA, well, we have 22 NYCHA buildings in District 9, and it is and you know, it's really. It really shows the level of depression, to be honest. The level of just people giving up with the voter turnout when you look at NYCHA, when you look at it historically, and even when you look at it currently. And I'm very proud to say that we moved the needle, but there's still a lot of work to do. The voter turnout was still low in our 22 NYCHA buildings. And so here we have a community that's highly impacted by decisions that are made by the government and yet aren't for a variety of reasons. I think roadblocks, I think lack of having candidates who truly speak to NYCHA are not inspired and are not or not able to engage in political process. I am happy though that we moved the needle. We registered over 300 new people to vote, We won by 100 votes.
That's exciting.
Registered over 300 new people to vote.
That made a difference.
So it made a difference. And we did increase voter turnout from the NYCHA buildings, particularly St. Nicholas houses came out very strong for us, but we actually had support across the board from NYCHA tenants, and a lot of that was because of the message of radical love, the message of change, me being a non-machine candidate, so not being part of what they have already experienced, and talking very intentionally about redistribution of wealth, which I know, scares quite a few people. But having the intentional conversation about financial resources and how we are going to move money to those who are most in need or are most oppressed really resonated. The hurdle to overcome, and we're still working on it, is the disappearing act, because that's what NYCHA is used to. People show up when it's time to run and then they disappear. So one of the things that we've been doing, I was out on the block yesterday. We got rained out. We were out there till the storm hit. We got rained out. But one of the things I've been doing is a listening tour, even post-election, getting out and talking and still being present, particularly with the most vulnerable and disenfranchised groups of the district. Yeah.
And do tell, what's your experience with your NYCHA developments?
Yeah, well, look, we won in Grand Houses and in Manhattanville, but that has more to do with the relationships, right, that we formed there, because we were intentional about the work we want to accomplish there. I had a press conference there with Congressman Ruchi Torres, son of public housing, to talk about the conditions of public housing and how we need to make a push at the federal level so that the federal infrastructure bill can include public housing as infrastructure to fix the elevators, lead pipes. I'm a tenant lawyer, so I represent a lot of tenants in public housing who really just speak to me about the dire conditions that they have to live under and just basic habitation. It's almost impossible in a lot of these facilities. So we need to make a big push there. Like Kristin said, we can't be disappearing. We need to make sure that we're continuing to engage the residents there. But also, like Kristin said, the participation when it comes from voting is very, very low. Douglas houses, for instance, I would say no more than 10% of the residents vote in Douglas houses, right? And I'm sure it's like that through public housing in many ways citywide, including Central Harlem. And so the folks who's are being affected by the decision are folks that are not being involved in politics, and we have to change that, right? We have to, increase civic participation, and we do that by intentional efforts and making sure that we treat everyone as human, and that we treat everyone as having a voice and a seat at the table.
I'm kind of curious. So I know on the national stage, when it's apparent that you're losing an election, you get a concession call, right? For you guys, and Shaun especially, knowing that there was an organized coalition, did you tell me that you received at least okay, Shaun, you got this, or not?
Oh, that's a good one. I got a call from Stacy, Maria, and Marty. Marty was the first to call Stacy, Maria the day after. I have not gotten a call from Corey or Dan.
Gotcha. Kristin, noting that you beat an incumbent, was there a call?
There was not a call from the Bill Perkins camp. I did get notification and calls from a few of the others who ran, because it, like I said, was a crowded challenger race. But from the incumbent, no, at least not yet, but no.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I know that you guys won't be deterred. You know the work ahead, that you're going to just, as they say, get to it, so to speak. NightWatchman, what do you have for them?
Looking forward, you guys have the rest of the year to prepare, obviously, for the November election, which is, as I said, not a foregone conclusion. We don't take it for granted. But we feel.
Well, hold it, back up. Are there any Republican challenges that you guys are going to be facing? Kristin?
There is in my race. So we have a Republican challenge and actually an independent challenge as well.
Interesting. Shaun?
I have 2 third-party candidate opponents.
Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
So looking past that, and like I said, we're not looking past it, but we're assuming that goes correctly. What are your objectives going into office at the beginning of the new year?
So we're still building ours. The plan I have is we're developing a plan for the first 100 days when I'm in office. And the plan I have has a lot to do with the Harlem acronym. I thought it was really important to try to implement or at least push the ball forward on at least one thing in each part of the seven area focus acronyms. So that will happen. But actually the listening tour that we started doing that I'm doing right now that we're already at is informing the first 100 days. Because I wanted to do this, really wild idea of talking to the people and getting input from the people.
Wild idea, right?
Just crazy.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah. It's almost like a democracy.
Yeah.
So like Kristin, we're still developing the first 100 days. And I mean, on top of my agenda is, expanding right to counsel for tenants facing eviction, having a plan that focuses on housing and security, making sure we make housing more secure. Something I'm very excited about is after school programs and the impact that's having on a lot of our kids, short-term and long-term, but also food security programs as well. And when it comes to public housing, a lot of folks deserve to, our kids deserve to play in nice parks. All of, the 8 parks at Grand Houses, the playgrounds rather, they need to be redone. And so I want to make sure that we are working on the conditions of public housing in West Harlem.
Now, we've sometimes heard phrases that don't necessarily work. So let's say defund the police, right? Where people just grab onto that, not necessarily knowing what the full impact of what it means. Okay, so what is your vision in terms of the community's relationship with the police? What should we do when there's a mental health crisis? Are we sending out the police or a trained professional? Kristin.
Well, I do say defund the police.
Okay.
But I think the important piece to add is fund the people. And this is something I've said in movement spaces as well. It's like those of us who have been marching and talking about defunding, we can't just talk about the absence. We have to talk about the presence, right? And Angela Davis has said, abolition is not an absence, but a presence. It's a presence of all the social safety nets that could actually move us towards a nonviolent world where we wouldn't need the presence of an external violent police force. So instead of just saying defund the police, I think we should say defund the police and fund the people and have that whole turn of phrase, because otherwise people don't connect what we're really talking about when we say reallocate that budget. But I am going to stay firm in saying we should reallocate that budget because gun violence is one of the biggest issues coming up in this listening tour. And the point and place in which we should address gun violence is about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps back from the point of place when someone is pulling the trigger, right? So the real place where we address it is by having those after school programs that Shaun was talking about. We have mental and emotional services. We need to look outside the police for those types of social safety nets to be developed. So we actually move towards a place where we prevent the harm in the first place. So it's not about individual officers. I don't have, a personal gripe, but it is about the good money is in prevention and talking about how the good money is in prevention and how we redirect resources to the programs and things that keep our youth engaged, keep our community engaged, create jobs, and take away from that energy that turns into violent energy on the streets.
Beautiful. Shaun.
I very much support investments in addressing root causes like incarceration, right? We're talking about after school programs, like if folks have homes, folks have schools, folks have food and their food secure, if folks have jobs, right? I don't think we'll be seeing crime, right? So I think that investing in that, which I support through, taxing the most wealthy homeowners, one of the top 1%, I would do that by supporting a tax on luxury development. I don't think it should be happening in the first place, but to the extent it happens, I think that is where we can raise the revenue to fund these programs. That being said, I do support, presence of police officers in mass transit, for instance. I support removing some monies from the police department to the extent we can allocate what the problem is. If the problem is the militarization of the police, what is the cost of demilitarizing the police? Then we should really remove some of that funding from the NYPD to the extent it is traceable to a problem we've identified, as opposed to saying we should just remove $1 billion. We don't know why. I like to work from the problem and then take away money based on what we've already determined the problem to be.
Gotcha.
This week, Governor Cuomo declared an executive order declaring gun violence a disaster emergency in New York and pledging some resources to the problem. I wondered what your thoughts were on that executive order from the governor.
I think that it is an emergency, and I saw Errol Lewis's article on that as well. It is an emergency, and it really requires a lot of coordination also with the federal level. I think 75% of the guns is coming from the South. I could be correct. I could be incorrect on that. Don't quote me on that. But a lot of it is coming from the South. But we have to be coordinated at the state, city, and the federal government to be able to track these guns and making sure that we are really taking them away from these streets, and also supporting gun buybacks.
Well, I agree with the supporting gun buybacks. The general narrative that comes from the governor's office is not one that I agree with. And the general narrative that tends to come up when we talk about gun violence is not one that I agree with, because people tend to then turn towards police. And again, I already said the real solution is prevention. Put the money in prevention, because otherwise we wind up in these cycles, and this is what we continue to do. This is how we got to an $11 billion plan for new jails and a $6 billion police budget, because we continue to do this, where we say, oh, this is the issue, the solution is police. XYZ happened, now the solution is police. And we have to come to the realization, like stop gaslighting the public and come to the realization that the solution is not police, and that police don't actually reduce crime. They do not reduce crime. So we need to figure out what we're going to actually invest in that's going to reduce the crime. And looking at the gun buyback programs and looking at the youth programs and the investment in education, the investment in housing and mental and emotional wellness, that would actually lead to reducing.
Quick question. So now you guys are going to be having a budget that also has what we call member item dollars coming from a nonprofit background. I know that you have, let's say, that to your discretion or discretionary funding, literally. So now, absolutely, we certainly do know that Mark had certain priority organizations that he was funding, and certainly Bill had priority organizations. Will you continue those particular initiatives with those organizations, or have you identified new organizations that say they do good work, they need to be supported? Kristin.
So yes and no. It's really case by case basis. There's a few organizations that I do really support. One of the programs that got a CASA grant from Perkins' office, although we did have to lobby pretty hard for it the most recent time around, is a Girl Be Heard program that is an after school program for differently abled children and at Haran School. And I actually, as a teaching artist, was involved in sessions there. And I can promise you that program is doing absolutely phenomenal work. So I will be supporting that. And I'll just keep looking case by case. But I do think there has been a lot of support for organizations that do already have a lot. And in that case, I am looking not to, disarm people, but, I am looking to put the money in the places where there is more need and not so much in places where organizations already have a lot of name recognition, a lot of outside support, a lot of donors, and et cetera. Because I come from an organizer movement space, I know a lot of people who are doing a lot with literally nothing and no support. And I am looking to fund that. So something like Harlem Community Fridges, and some people who are doing a great group, jump shots over gunshots. That connects to what I was talking about before, where it's like, how do we invest in the things that are alternatives? I would want to send money to some of these places that are right now doing, like I said, a lot with nothing. So they're going to be able to do a lot with resources.
Beautiful. Shaun.
It would be a case by case basis. I'm sure I stuff to meet with a lot of organizations. I'm sure there will be a lot of overlap with Mark's folks that were budgeted. I'm sure there may be some new folks who may get some things. But I think it's going to be, in all honesty, it's going to be done in conversation with the residents of District 7. And it'll be done in a way that also reflects a budget that also reflects needs, like Kristin said.
Oh, one thing I'm sorry. One thing I do want to add, because it was a campaign promise and I am going to stick by it, is that there will be a portion of discretionary funding that goes towards figuring out housing for those who are houseless or homeless in this district. And I'm the only candidate that committed to, if we cannot do some permanent housing solution on a large scale in the city, where we, instead of funding the shelter system, are really looking at permanent housing solutions, then I was going to look at doing whatever level of pilot program or support for something like that I could do in my district. And that will definitely be happening.
Beautiful. One of the things that we certainly saw during the pandemic was the burden that was really placed on the restaurant and hospitality community. But one of the things that came out of the city was, of course, the open streets. Literally being able to build structures into the street bed to allow for then the gathering of folk. Certainly, are you going to see that remains even when the pandemic leaves, or what? What is your strategy for the assistance of restaurants and small businesses? Tell us, Kristin.
Oh, so yes, I actually think open streets are a beautiful creation, and especially for District 9 and Central. I mean, West Harlem as well. Harlem has such a beautiful history and legacy and culture of art and activism and Black art, and I just want to use some of that space to make sure we're doing really cultural and beautiful things. I have a whole statement for anyone listening. If you go to kristinforharlem.com, you could read it. It's about solidarity economy for Harlem. And in it, I talk about my plans to support small, local owned, and particularly Black owned businesses in the community.
Beautiful. Shaun, tell us, answer that, but also your relationship that you'll have then with the West Harlem Development Corporation. How you going to also foster that to see that they get some more resources out to your constituents?
Well, to the first point, I support, the open streets that are, there's a lot of open street programs in my district, like from 106 to 109th. I love it. I would like to keep that. But also we need to continue supporting our small businesses. When the safety barriers were being implemented, the city changes regulations literally millions of times, which put a lot of small businesses, out of compliance, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a result of that, they had to cough up more money out of pocket just to be in compliance. And so the city, they should have gotten it right the first time. And on top of that, they should have been providing the safety barriers to small businesses in need, especially to make sure they were in compliance from the first place. And also, I don't think the city should be enforcing, cease and desist orders to restaurants that make a good faith effort to be in compliance. We saw what happened with the restaurant on 148th with
what was that, Harlem Public?
Harlem Pub. Yeah, they got a cease and desist order for being out of compliance. So I'm fighting for small businesses and making sure that we keep the authentic social fabric of our neighborhoods, which small businesses bring. I'm going to be a strong ally to the Development Corp. It's doing incredible work. But I'm sure I'll be sitting down with a lot of these groups later on.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that is going to be key in how effective the new city council is going to be is collectively finding the voice, obviously choosing a new speaker, but then developing the working relationship with the mayor, who is presumptively looking to be Eric Adams at this point in time. So, what are your thoughts on the new city council and a relationship to Eric Adams as a prospective mayor?
I can go first. Well, I endorsed Eric Adams for mayor, and he endorsed me. I think we have a very strong working relationship. With respect to the next speaker, right? I think we need someone who reflects the needs of our neighborhood, and who's going to bring home the bacon for District 7 residents. I am a fiduciary to District 7 first and foremost, and that is indeed my main obligation. But also someone who's also empathetic, citywide, to the needs of working families. Someone who understands that police accountability is important. Someone who understands that labor families are important. Someone who understands that truly affordable housing is important, and that we're going to make it a priority. I mean, in addition to the baseline of bringing home the bacon, there's also someone who's empathetic to our needs and who reflects our values.
Kristin.
So I think it will be very interesting to see, because 1 in 5 Harlem District 9 residents ranked Eric Adams #1 and ranked me #1, which means you actually voted for someone who is a former cop and voted for a pretty vocal abolitionist, which is it's just very interesting. But I think for me, it is about serving the people. It's not about we have to agree on everything. It's not even about we have to be personal friends. That's personal. So what do we do to serve the people? And as long as we can cultivate what I'm hoping is going to be a very productive working relationship on that basis, coming together with the things we do agree on, implementing where we can implement, and some healthy discourse and disagreements where we don't agree. I think that's what governing is about. It's, again, this wild idea that we're going to, wait for it, serve the people. So we'll see how that all goes. In terms of speaker, I would say similar things. I have been reached out to by a couple of folks. But it's early, and that's what I'm going to say here too. It's early, so it's too early to really know where I'm going to cast my ballot in that space. But I do think we need a strong speaker. I'm personally a servant leader, and I look to have collaborative leadership style, and I'm hoping for a speaker that has that type of vibe as well. So let's see what happens.
Very good.
Interesting. I'm not familiar that much with the process of selecting the speaker, so I assume that has to happen after the obviously after the November election.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very early for that.
Yeah.
I think it gets done before the November election. I think a lot of the work is done before the November election.
Okay.
As the conversations are going
up to Somos, everything leading up to Somos, I think is when most things are going to be, decided. I think it's very early though. It's still very early. Yeah. But I do think it'll be decided somewhere before November though. Or at least they'll have those speaker candidates have like voting blocks by that point. And then they go into Somos or in December with this voting block. Hey, this is what I have. Now I need you to get me across the finish line.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, you know what? Go ahead, NightWatchman.
There is one person who won their city council race who is a former Manhattan borough president who might be interesting.
You're right. You can't make that stuff up. I hear you, NightWatchman, for sure.
Interesting dynamic. So,
very true. Very true.
For those who haven't figured it out, I'm talking about Gail Brewer.
Yes.
Yes. Who spent a lot of time in the city council before being borough president.
And now back. Yes.
Early on, I'd have to think of her as someone who checks a lot of boxes. In terms of somebody who's got the institutional knowledge, and also somebody who's tremendous track record of being for the people.
Yeah, constituent services off the chain.
Yeah.
So you know what?
I have a Gail Brewer story I like to tell.
Go ahead.
Gail Brewer in a NYCHA meeting on a Wednesday night in December. It was cold. It was raining. No staff with her. No press. And it was like, yeah, that's a servant leader right there.
Absolutely. So well, while we have these servant leaders, some parting shots, I would like to hear some last words from you, Kristin, as well as also a constituent. If they need to get in touch with you or any of your staff, what can they do? Go ahead, Kristin.
Yeah, so we're doing, as I mentioned before, I'm doing a listening tour. I actually started that before the results of ranked choice voting even came in, because my thought was simply, well, we're in a good position to win it, and if we don't win it, then I will turn notes and ideas and everything over to whoever does win it. But the great thing is that we did win it. And so anyone who has thoughts, ideas, policy points, or personal constituent concerns, you can find the schedule at kristinforharlem.com. Today we're at 132nd and Lenox. The location changes each day, but we're from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Out there. And you will most likely see me myself, because I'm almost always there. And if I'm not there, then there will be someone who's setting up to be senior staff who you could talk to as well. So kristinforharlem.com. We have a phone number. We have email, kristinforharlem@gmail.com. Reach out.
Beautiful. Shaun.
Well, if anyone in District 7 wants to get a hold of us, you can email me at friendsofshaun@gmail.com. And it's actually Friends of Shaun Abreu. My apologies. My name is spelled ShaunAbreu. I'm looking forward to having discussions, maybe have like coffee in your corner kind of thing. Sometime between August and the fall, to talk about the first 100 days. But right now, Friends of Shaun Abreu is the best way to reach me at Gmail, and looking forward to chatting with you.
Beautiful. Night Watchman, take us home.
Well, first of all, I'd like to extend my congratulations to both of the parents of both of our guests.
Moms do it, baby. Moms do it.
Mom, let's get dad in there too.
Okay.
No, my dad was actually super supportive as well. And I should say, I unfortunately lost him in November, so he didn't get to see some of the results of all his hard work, for the campaign and just for me. But yes, he was a big part of it.
He's definitely looking down for sure.
Father was very helpful.
Give that credit. You both are obviously products of loving families, and we appreciate your commitment to public service. We're looking forward to seeing the ideas and fresh energy you can bring to the city council. And since you're both we're constituents, so you'll hear from us as well. Again, in love and support, and we're delighted to give you an opportunity to just let people know a little bit more about who you are. We are Soul Lounge Primetime. We could be heard on WHCR 90.3 FM, 7 p.m. on Monday evenings, and you can always watch us at 8 o'clock on our YouTube channel, Soul Lounge Primetime. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, y'all. And congratulations.
Thank you.
District 7 and 9. Yay!